Hello and welcome to the Guardian Football Weekly. Anatoliy Trubin, you're looking at an 8 out of 10 on the Jimmy Glass scale at least. A goalkeeper scoring the 8th minute of 5 minutes of injury time against 9-man Real Madrid is the kind of drama UEFA were hoping for last night. And if you put 18 football matches on at the same time, something exciting will happen. Benfica the story then, along with Bodo Glimt. We know they're good on plastic in sub-zero temperatures, but to go to Atleti and win to get into the playoffs is a stunning achievement. 5 English clubs make it into the top 8. Arsenal were through already. Wins for Liverpool, Chelsea, Spurs and Man City prove what we already knew about the strength of the Premier League. Harvey McBarnes had the chance to get them all in there. A draw at PSG, not enough for Newcastle or PSG. Maddening handball alert. We'll try and round up the rest of the games and look ahead to the Premier League weekend if there's time. Answer your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Nicky Bandini, welcome.
Morning.
Hello, Lars Sivertsen.
Hello, Max.
Nick Ames is here. Hey, Nick.
Hello, Max.
And live from Lisbon, Archie Rhind-Tutt. Archie, what a cameo for you.
Buzzing, Max. I've barely been able to sleep and I have no horse in this race. It's wild.
Yeah. Our Ukrainian football expert friend Andrew Todo said a full hour on Trubin here. I mean, you were there to witness that winner. Just talk us through that, which puts them through at the expense of Marseille, right? They needed that goal, hence Trubin being up for the free kick.
To start with, Benfica could have won this game 8-2 and that wouldn't have been something to complain about. The fact that Kylian Mbappe is coming out and saying it could have been 5-1 at half-time. Real Madrid are not exactly the team who are going to say, well, you know what, we really got battered there. But that tells you how well this José Mourinho team were attacking in such a fluid way that I was kind of double taking the whole game. The problem was, as you can tell by the fact that Anatoliy Trubin had to go up, is they weren't very good at putting their chances away. And the bizarre thing is that José Mourinho's assistants were not keeping him in the loop enough to tell him, actually, we need to go for this. Because such was the way that there were these penalty shouts in the first half. One was given, one was scored by Vangelis Pavlidis. But all of that meant that the Benfica game was about 5 minutes behind everyone else. So, in a way, I know that there will be conspiracy theorists out there going, another masterstroke by Jose Mourinho, making sure his team knew exactly what they had to do come the final minute. But it's not like anyone knew what they had to do, to the point that I'm down one end of the stadium where the goal didn't happen. And I can just see wave after wave of Benfica fan exclaiming, hands on their heads, you have to go for it. Do you not know what's about to happen? We're about to go out. And so Trubin just thought everyone was like losing their shit over the fact of, we might beat Real Madrid. So he's looking around being like, calm. He's actively trying to waste time before then finally the message gets through. We need to go for this now. We're in the 96th minute of the game. And so he pumps the ball long, they win a free kick, and then finally the message gets through to him, you need to go up, like right now. And then after that, I'm watching it, and I just see the ball go in, and I'm like, the goalkeeper scored. No, he didn't. The goalkeeper scored. Anatoliy Trubin. What? I just could not. There were so many blurs. I just see this swarm of Benfica players invade the pitch and trail round Trubin, and just the stands and just seeing the jumping. But like, Benfica have not got a great history of fantastic European moments. Like, for them, stuff is meant to go wrong at the worst time in European football. So I think you could really tell that for them, they couldn't quite believe that they had this. And the fact that they'd not played Real Madrid since 1965, which, given the amount of football that we have these days, is something I still can't get my head around. And so for them to have this moment against Real Madrid, and for it to be this player, is something I cannot comprehend still.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I don't know, Nicky. I think, we like to analyse football, hopefully in a more than superficial way, but really, at the end of it all, a keeper sort of lolloping upfield and bizarre. I feel like there is a magnetism when a keeper's in the box, that people don't know how to mark them. The ball goes near them. They might not score, but all those things are just, everyone is like, I am absolutely here for this.
Yeah, I mean,
needs to be said, it was actually a really good header. Like, that wasn't
Great
just
header.
like it smacked him in the face and rebounded in. It looked like a striker's header the way he took it. But Archie's nailed it. Like, Trubin had no idea that this was an important moment about 60 seconds before he's up there in the penalty area. He thought, we're winning this game, it's great, everything's where it's supposed to be. Mourinho said that in his post-game press conference, that even with his substitutions, he didn't know that any of this mattered. At the same time, though, I was thinking as Archie was saying all that about Mourinho masterstrokes when we rewrite the narrative, but is this going to be a takeaway lesson from this night of chaos that we're going to be talking about? Because I think it was great. I think Max seems more on the fence about it than I do. I flipping loved it last night, but it was brilliant. But is the takeaway going to be, make sure you do a good amount of shithousery in the first half, because you really want the extra time at the end of the second half, so you know whether your keeper has to go up in the 95th minute to score the winner for you. Like, maybe that's important information, because goal difference mattered. Goal difference mattered quite a lot in the end.
Yeah, it was, Lars. I mean, I'm just asking the same question now, but I think it's worth it. But so, for me, we'll get to Bodo Glimt. They're the two headlines from this. I don't want to be grumpy about it. I just I'm not sure if this is how we should consume football, watching 18 games at the same time. But for one evening only, it's probably worth it. And this was just such a standout moment, Lars.
I wrestled with it because, there was too much. I mean, there's too much information to take in, I found. It was very difficult. It was enjoyable, but there was too much going on. Especially towards the end where, like, I was, like a lot of people, watching the goal show primarily to try to get a good helicopter view of what was going on. But then towards the end, I had to watch Bodo Glimt because we'll get to it. But that is probably the biggest result in Norwegian club football history, so I couldn't not watch the last 10 minutes of it. But that also meant I missed some other stuff that was going on. Like, there was nowhere. Yeah, it was that thing when you're is this a fairground thing? They put you in the machine with the money that flies around, and then they turn on the fan, and then the money goes everywhere, and you try to grab the money.
Sounds like the Crystal Maze.
It was a bit like that.
Yeah, that's Crystal Maze.
That's what it was, though, Nicky. It was the Crystal Maze of football. This and. I mean, we're going to get years where there's even more big things at stake here in terms of, like, big teams not qualifying, more English teams that a lot of people care about being on the verge of not qualifying. So it's going to get even more chaotic, I think, which, above all, is a challenge for podcasters. Future podcasters might have an issue there. But it was fun.
Just to pick up on what Max said there, though, like, I mean, that's, like, the once a year thing, I agree. Like, if this was every week, too much. But that's kind of what they've successfully done, is we now have like an extra event day in the calendar. Yeah. Obviously, you've got the Champions League final. That's an event everyone looks forward to. But this is now going to be every year, like, oh, it's that day. And it becomes like an annual thing that people look forward to. I think from a fan point of view, obviously, for a lot of fans, really what they're interested in is just their specific club, and those fans will be at their club's game, and they will be or watching their club's game on TV, and they won't give a stuff about everything else. But I think from a spectator point of view, from the fans who aren't as invested in one team point of view, I think that this is it's where sport has always been trending, but is moving more and more, which is into these big event occasions, and it is, I think, an event occasion now. This final day of the Champions League group. It's
clippable football, isn't it? I mean, hopefully we'll get on to a bit more of the sort of footballing, sporting ramifications. But I don't know, just anecdotally, I don't think any of my WhatsApp groups last night of friends who like football but aren't football journalists were watching these games. I don't think they were watching the games. I don't think they were even watching the goal show. But they were aware of what had happened at about 10 o'clock and, sending links on Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever. And I think that's the road that this showpiece event goes down. Now, I personally don't like that much as I enjoyed the evening very much, actually. But I don't think UEFA and its stakeholders will care that much as long as the broadcast rights money is still pouring in. And I guess we'll see in a generation's time, or possibly a bit more quickly than that, whether that is brought to bear. But it feels like a bit of a dirty pleasure last night, to be honest. It's clippable football, not the real thing.
I like that, you know, on the one hand, we're saying that this is clippable and quick, and then you're just saying we have to wait a generation to see if it's going to work or not. That feels like, even for me, as a legacy fan, waiting too long. Archie, it even made us happy for Jose, right? You spoke to him afterwards, but, you know, him and a
Speaking
ball
of
boy,
jerky
you're like,
pleasure.
oh, yeah, yeah, exactly.
I just wanted to add that the change in competition structure has meant it's become less about the sport and more about the entertainment. In terms of sporting merit has stopped being as important, but I think also because it was so clear who the best teams were that now that is much more murky to see. And in terms of entertainment, that is, as we've seen last night, you have over 20 clubs who are almost in a final on the final match day, and teams play with a different mindset. That's why Bodo Glimt, I think, were able to get themselves up for this game against Atletico, whereas who knows, in a usual group of four, they might not have already been still in the competition. Jose last night, there are a few things that will really stay in my head about last night. One, for example, was walking out the stadium and seeing these Benfica fans kind of circling like vultures, almost looking for and someone coming up to me going, "Are you from Spain? Are you from Spain?" And I'm like, no, I'm from England. "Oh, why are you here?" And I was like, "Well, because the football isn't it great?" That, yeah, and then kind of just walking away. And this other guy comes up to me and he's kind of clutching an Anatoliy Trubin plastic cup, and he's going, Trubin, and I was like, "Oh, can I take a photo of that?" "Sure." And he's like, "Oh no, but get a photo with me in it as well." I was like, "Okay." So I took a kind of reluctant selfie with him, just smiling away. And Trubin in the tunnel as well. I think he was okay when I spoke to him as well, and he was saying he didn't know that he had to be up 60 seconds before. But also he seemed quite a reluctant hero. He was walking around and there was a look on his face being like, "Well, if I'd known that I'd have to do this much media, I'm not sure I would have actually wanted to score, to be honest." This is quite a lot. But the memory, the core memory that will stick in my mind is seeing Jose Mourinho walk out of the Benfica dressing room straight after full time, and Dean Howson, his former player at Roma, is there. And this is how I wanted to start the interview with Mourinho as well. However, due to the way that broadcasting works and you can't swear, I couldn't start with what he said to Dean Howson because he just went up and he huffed, "Fucking hell."
That's so good. That is, you know, the elite level is Sunday League all at the same time, isn't it? And that's perfect. Hey, Archie, you can go away now. You've done your job. Thank you, my friend. Just a quick one, Lars, on Real Madrid. Dropping down into the playoffs, not ideal for Arbeloa. Does it matter? I mean, look, PSG won from the playoffs last time. It's not a disaster.
Yeah, I feel like everything that happens at Real Madrid now is more almost like a referendum on the players than on Arbeloa, because they had a manager who's quite a good manager who was telling them what to do, and they basically told him to get fucked. So there's like, okay, we don't have this manager who will tell them what to do now. Now we're just going to do it by, you know, how the big stars want to do it. So if they screw up now, it's kind of on them, and I think. Absolutely, getting played off the park at times, it seems, at least in terms of the chances they conceded. You know, conceding 4 goals to Benfica, having 2 red cards towards the end of the game. It's quite a dismal failure by Real Madrid, and maybe an experienced coach at the side of the pitch who could tell them what to do would have been a good thing here.
Yeah, if they listened. Look, so as we've established, Benfica are through. So Marseille went out because of that goal. They lost 3-0 at Club Brugge. They started this competition pretty well, but finished 25th, the worst of all places. But Simon Mignolet is still playing, and he made a lot of saves for Brugge, so nice to see him there. Let's go then to the Bodo win, 2-1 away at Atleti. And as you've said, like, we know they're good at home. We know they're good on that artificial surface. We know they're good when it's really cold. But to go to the Wanda Metropolitana, go a goal down, and to come back is brilliant.
Yeah, and the context here is as well is that they haven't played the league game since November. Their last league game, I believe, was the 30th of November. Then they played that away game at Dortmund in the Champions League where they got a point, and on the 10th of December. Turns out to be an important point. But that set them up so that they just needed to beat City and Atletico Madrid away to qualify, to give themselves a chance at qualifying, which is unbelievable, really. So since I believe it's October 2024, 2 teams have beaten Atletico Madrid away, which is Barcelona and Bodo Glimt, which is what?
Wow.
It doesn't make any sense. It's absolutely absurd. And we've talked about it here a few times. I think Jan-Åge Fjørtoft made a good point. It's not 9 out of 11 players in the starting lineup are Norwegians as well. And the goalkeeper, Nikita Häkkinen, is in the process of receiving Norwegian citizenship, I believe. Actually, he's joining our side. But yeah, it's a Cinderella. It's a genuine Cinderella story without big money behind it. It's built on a local identity, built on a football identity. You've got a number of players who have been successful enough at Bodo Glimt that they've gotten offers to play abroad. They've gone abroad. They've decided they don't like it and come back to Bodo. And it made me chuckle. So Jens Petter Hauge is one of them, who's the very talented winger who's played at Milan, played at Frankfurt, never quite made it. He said after the game that in terms of what we did with the ball, it was one of our worst games this year. Which raises a few questions. Obviously, they've not played too many games this year. I think he means last season as well. I mean, the other game they played this year was beating Man City. But I think the point was more like they weren't able to. They're self-critical to the point where they were saying, "Oh, we weren't really able to do what we were usually do with the ball here," but they still stayed rugged and disciplined and held off. And it's an absolutely unbelievable achievement. And you can't really lay any of the usual caveats of the playing surface or the temperature or the fact that it's really far north or all the other things people complain about. You know, they're not away from home as well. Absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, it's so good, isn't it? And so you would say the greatest, because we were having this discussion last week about the City game, but this trumps that for those reasons?
I think it does. I think it does. So the other touchstone is when Rosenborg beat Milan away from home in 96, I'd like to say. Could have been 97.
97.
Yeah. Oh, you've looked it up. That's so annoying. It's 97
I
anyway.
just know these. I know these things, Lars. Come on.
Yeah, they had the Hegem goal because that was a good Milan team on paper, but I think they were going through some kind of crisis at the time. I think a vote for that is more of a nostalgia vote. I think beating City and then Atletico Madrid away, being only the second team since 2024 to beat them away from home to qualify is absolutely next level. And I think what we also need to bear in mind, I think it is harder for smaller clubs now than it was 20 years ago. I just think it is, 30 years ago, because the financial discrepancies have gotten so large now. To build and to keep a team together when you're from a smaller league now is harder than it was 30 years ago. The concentration of elite level talent in these sort of handful of elite clubs is even more extreme than it was 30 years ago. So I do think this is on a different level. And I just love the fact that it's done without massive financial backing, because it really should be an example. If you are from a smaller country, if you're supporting a smaller club, like I keep saying this, but like 10 years ago, they were in the second tier in Norway. Like, it is possible. Your team can be quite bad, and within this decade, it is theoretically possible for them to achieve these sorts of things, even without some kind of shady kleptocrat putting billions into it. You know, it is still just about possible.
I agree with Lars. I think they're single-handedly saving European football at this point. Yep. I think genuinely, given the gross accumulation of resources that we see basically in almost every position above them in this Champions League ranking, and in many of them below, to do what they have done and to show that sound management, steady growth, building, not splashing millions around it, consistency, a style of play that is bought into. I just think it's the most incredible thing going on in European football at the moment by a distance, and I think people should know it. It's remarkable, and I mean they've got. Who is it in the playoffs? I think they could play Real or Inter.
Yeah, brilliant.
And you just like you after this, you couldn't not give them a chance. Like I remember their draw with Dortmund a few months ago, when it looked like that was just a nice souvenir to take back. And as Lars has just outlined, they've turned it around incredibly. And I think it's the most important story going on in European football right now. I also think it's not one that should blind people to the wider structural issues that are still cutting out half of the continent from the elite level. But that's a broader debate, I guess.
Yeah, there's like a second thread to that, which is, I suppose, the fact that Premier League clubs are very, very rich, and Premier League clubs are very dominant in this table, which I'm sure we'll get to. But the question I wanted to come to throw at Lars actually is like, what's the secret sauce, I guess, because it's not just Bodo, obviously. Norway,
surely it's herring, right? Surely it's herring, isn't it?
But we always do this in football, don't we? You know, you get countries, brands of football tend to have their moments of up and down, and it feels like right now Norway is as up as I can ever remember it being. Again, like the World Cup qualifying, it wasn't just that they finished ahead of Italy; they beat everyone and they battered everyone. Is there something that maybe we aren't seeing, or is it one of those cyclical things, or?
Well, we've actually been worried a little bit about the month of January because, Erling Haaland wasn't scoring, Sheldrup wasn't getting in the team, what's going on with Oscar Bob? Like, there's a few little question marks going into the looking ahead to the World Cup. But, yesterday was a good day for Norway. We had Sheldrup scoring 2 goals for Benfica. I mean, José Mourinho said to Archie after the game, I can't believe Archie didn't bring this up, but Mourinho said about the goal that the most important thing is that the delivery is good, which I think is harsh on Trubin, to be fair. But Jose said the most important thing is that the delivery is good. Now, of course, that was Fredrik Ausnes, the Norwegian, who sadly doesn't play for the national team right now, but, I just think it's with smaller countries. I mean, it's such a boring answer, but I think with smaller countries, you have generations. You have stronger and weaker generations, and I'm very, very lucky that right now we have an unbelievable generation going. In terms of the secret sauce of Bodo Glimt, I think that's an interesting question, because even as they've had these European adventures, beating Roma, getting to the Europa League semi-final, they now have quite a bit of money by Scandinavian context, just because they brought in, I mean, they're not spending a lot of it, but they brought in a lot of cash. And so far, they've mostly spent it on handing out decent contracts to returning players, these guys who went abroad and decided they'd be interested in coming back, handing out a good contract by Scandinavian standards to their coach. I keep waiting for them to try to turn into the Norwegian FC Copenhagen, because FC Copenhagen kind of hoover up the most talented teenagers from the region and are not shy in terms of spending money. And Bodo Glimt are mostly just kind of keeping it local, keeping it, and they're not spending any of this money really compared to what they could do, and they're keeping faith with the guys they have. And it's an interesting case of how I think the community that you can create, the connections between players, the strength of the system, actually can enable you to punch up a little bit compared to the sort of absolute individual talent that you come up against if you're able to keep a group together. I think that's sort of really interesting case study from a footballing sense that's happening up there.
A stunning generation of Norwegian footballers and a stunning generation of Norwegian football pundits, Lars. We are lucky to be alive in this time. Welcome to part 2 of the Guardian Football Weekly. So let's do PSG Newcastle first. That draw, not really good for either of them. And Nicky, Harvey Barnes has such a massive chance, doesn't he? 3 minutes to go to get what would have been a brilliant win for Newcastle.
Yeah, and hard to sort of get a handle on whether it would have felt like a deserved win or not. Because on the one hand, I mean, PSG did create more chance through the game. Obviously, it was a great penalty save from Pope at the beginning, which felt like justice because that penalty was just...
My God, I can't.
Oh, such a horrible... I mean, I don't know.
Sorry, that is abolish IFAB levels for me. Like Barcola, I mean it. He punches the ball into... I wouldn't give a handball against Barcola either, but he punches the ball into Lewis Miley's hand. Surely you can't go, that isn't a handball and that is a handball. It is obscene. And like, in a way, actually, you have to give credit to the PGMOL. Sorry, it's your answer, Nicky, but because at least the handball law in the Premier League is terrible, but not that bad. But like, no referee can go, this is what the fans want. Nobody can want this. Like, I know I'm yelling at people who either, it's not achieving anything, but I don't think IFAB listened to anybody. They're impossible to reach. They're this unaccountable body. I just can't stand it. But anyway, do carry on.
just got this image now of IFAB AI chatbot that you're trying to get through to the department on, and Max is furiously typing. They just cannot get
Looks
through
like you're
the
trying
right
to ask
person.
a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do these answers help? Fuck off. AI,
Yeah,
IFAB
I
bot.
mean, there's no point analysing that penalty. As anyone who's seen it understands what we're talking about, and you just said it. Yeah, from one arm to another. How is one arm okay and one arm not? It seems ridiculous. But PSG were better for a long stretch. And if anything, the Newcastle equalised for half-time felt like, oh, well, that's a bit of a surprise. But in the second half, as you said, once the two substitutions come in, once Barnes and Gordon come onto the pitch, the game really shifted. The directness that gave Newcastle, it really felt like they ended in the ascendancy and could have taken all 3 points. So it was definitely an impressive performance away from home. Slightly hard to know exactly what to make of it from the point of view that this is PSG and they are the defending champions, and we expect better of them, because of course everyone can just point at the fact that they didn't get in the top 8 last season either, and they went on to absolutely clobber everyone in the knockout rounds. So who knows? But certainly, I mean, even however they feel about, oh, maybe we could have won that at the end, I think you can't really say, oh, going away to PSG and getting a point is some bad result, is it? It's still a good result.
Yeah, and Nick, like, getting into the top 8 it's not so much getting through to the next round, it's just not having to play 2 more football matches, which sort of feels counterintuitive about, you win games to play more games. But in this case, it's just 2 games that certainly Newcastle, with their injuries, do not need.
Yes, the aim is to deprive yourself of football, which seems slightly strange, but maybe sensible given the proliferation of it these days. And I think, look, Newcastle, as we know, have been pretty stretched for some time, would probably have liked to avoid the playoff, but I think they're probably quite pleased to be in there and to be putting up dogged performances like last night's ultimately was. And also, we don't need another English team in that top 8, do we? We've got so many of them already. Yeah, so
Newcastle's draws look very favourable as well. Just to add to that, like the 2 games,
Monaco or
the 2 opponents
Qarabag,
they could have, Monaco, Qarabag, I would solidly expect them to beat.
Yeah, I think so. No, but you're right about how many English teams you could possibly get. The coefficient will keep changing. Eventually, there'll be 10 English teams in the top 8.
I don't know if I'm interjecting too early on this point, but I just think it's a massive concern, honestly. Like, I know there'll be champagne corks popping in neon where UEFA are based at the level of drama that we saw last night and all massively enjoyed, but 5 English teams in the top 8, 6 in the top, 12. Something's not right there. It shows, and we probably need to see this, to be fair, over a longer period of time, 2 or 3 years, to see it borne out. Like we can't jump to conclusions, but it does seem this year to bear out the idea that the Premier League clubs can stock up such deep squads with such incredible resource compared to everyone else, roll out whatever rotated team they need to go with, and still do absolutely fine. Now, that can bring different consequences later on in the knockout stage, as we've seen before, because of the amount of games. Some European teams are maybe a bit fresher, etc., etc. But at the moment, it's a bit of a pulverization in my book, and it's been very entertaining lower down the table. But is that because the other European teams are concertinaing and the Premier League is streaking away? I don't know, but it is not a pleasant look, and it isn't lost in non-Premier League boardrooms across Europe when future formats are looked at, etc. I think.
Sure, and I think, Lars, the only sort of flip side to that is, as Nick has alluded to, is it doesn't mean an English side will win it, because there are some other teams that are, big and good and have lots of money who will be pushing in the latter stages.
Yeah, of course, because that's the joy of knockout tournaments. But I would expect, another ranking that came out recently where the English were dominating was the annual sort of Deloitte financial report, right? So the Deloitte Moneylight thing came out recently, and 6 out of the top 10 clubs in the world by revenue are English, right? So the 6 out of the top 10. So it doesn't shock me that we're then seeing the the 6 English teams amongst the top 12 in this tournament. The only difference really is, you have on the money side, United are in the top 10, but they're not in the Champions League. Substitute Newcastle United, who have a little bit of money behind them, I think it's fair to say. So it's not hugely shocking to see that that's how it ends up. And I think it is a weakness. The format has delivered fun. You can't deny that. But it's an even safer, runway for you have to mess up a lot to not qualify at all. So I think it's for the big rich teams. It's a very, very comfortable format, even if there are some extra games in there for their schedules. Which I guess was the point of the format. That's why it was introduced. It was supposed to even more content, even less of a chance to lose big teams in the group stages, and enough scraps for the rest of us to enjoy, I guess, is the idea. And reluctantly, it seems to be delivering on all fronts. What a night for the Swiss.
There's a weird like part of this, which I think maybe hasn't been talked about much, which is an extra advantage that the English clubs have in this league phase is they can't play the other English clubs. So they can't run into these other rich clubs. Whereas, so for instance, like talking about, it's pretty narrow in the top 8 spots, right? It's pretty narrow. Like we're talking about all these English clubs getting in. I mean, there's a point difference between quite a few of them not being in there, right? And look at the fact that, say a team like Inter, I'm picking them just because they're the Champions League finalists last season and currently top of Serie A. Well, they had 3 losses, one of which was against Liverpool, one of which was against Arsenal. And, those are games you can lose. And the other one was away to Atletico Madrid, which clearly Bodo didn't lose there, but
most
a lot of
teams lose. Yeah.
But meanwhile, I'm going to get absolutely roasted for this now because everyone knows I'm an Arsenal fan. But it's just easy to pull out the example of Tottenham. Tottenham played 2 teams that finished in the top half of this group. They played Villarreal, who were 35th. They played Eintracht Frankfurt, who were 33rd. Copenhagen, who were 31st. Slavia Prague, who were 34th. Monaco, who were 21st. And then Bodo, of course, 23rd. Dortmund, 17th. There are very different schedules going on here.
Yeah,
and one
it's a very
advantage
good
that you've got there is you're not going to play the other English clubs who are
Yeah,
likely
I mean,
to
I
finish in the
suppose.
top half.
I suppose the way Tottenham are tearing it up in the Premier League would mean that they probably would have beaten lots of top teams anyway. Can I ask you, Nicky, about Napoli losing to Chelsea? I mean, we'll do both sides there. I mean, they turned it around. They're 2-1 up. Did you have hope at that moment?
I have a distinct fatalism whenever I watch any Antonio Conte team in Europe. I feel like no matter what the journey is to get there, we know where the destination is, which is going to be a disappointment. I will say Napoli have been dealing with, as much as Conte is a professional elite level, I would say, Mona, when it comes to injuries and stuff, he is dealing with quite an injury crisis at the moment. When you think about all the players who he hasn't had available, from obviously someone like De Bruyne, you kind of go, well, you signed De Bruyne, he's going to miss some time, but he was part of the project this season. But then also players like Anguissa, even someone like Billy Gilmour who hasn't been there. Lukaku did come back in this game, but hasn't been there for most of the season. You can go on. The list is really long. Rahmani in defence, it's been a really, really long injury list for them. And you see that, in fact, in the fact that their first goal in this game is scored by Antonio Vergara, which is a great story,
goal,
by the way. Fantastic goal, homegrown player who is so unknown that at the weekend when he was playing against Juventus, they have this great ref cam in Italy this season where the referees are all have got cameras on them, so you're seeing their interactions with players, which is often hilarious. But the weekend, the referee in the game against Juventus was trying to talk to Vergara in English because he didn't know who he was, and so he just assumed he was a foreign player. And Vergara's there being like, no, speak to me in Italian. I don't know what you're saying.
That's brilliant.
So they are stretched, Napoli, and I thought the first half, coming back from a goal down, was some of the most impressive football they've played in a while. Honestly, they're on not a good run right now. They've won, I think, one of their last 7 games in all competitions, and then to some extent, it's the same conversation we've been having. Premier League quality and depth just showed. I mean, João Pedro scored an absolutely screaming goal to make it 2-2.
Yeah.
And then obviously Cole Palmer's come off the bench, who coming back to fitness is going to make a big difference for them and sets them up for another one. Chelsea were great in the second half and they deserve to win and they're the better team. But this isn't where Napoli failed to qualify. Napoli failed to qualify because in the last round they were a goal up and a man up against Copenhagen after 40 minutes. And they should have put that game to bed about 50 times and wound up drawing it. And that's why they're not going through.
Yeah, just on Conte, 8 Champions League campaigns, 4 group stage exits, 2 knockout wins, 2012, 2013, home and away to Celtic. That's it. And a big result for Liam Rosenior. Now has 5 wins in his opening 6. Off the pitch, a Chelsea supporter was stabbed and taken to hospital on Tuesday night in Naples. Chelsea said the club's aware of an incident that took place on Tuesday evening. 2 fans are being treated in hospital, having sustained non-life-threatening injuries. We wish them well, of course. Spurs won 2-0 at Eintracht Frankfurt, Lars.
Yeah.
Frank in.
I mean, it was kind of meaningless to try to like make any detailed analysis of any of the 18 games as they were going on. But by all accounts, looking at numbers and reports from people who were there, the Spurs were quite good. Seems to be they were quite good against the Frankfurt team who aren't doing very well at the moment. But this seems to be like they're not terrible, Frankfurt, and Tottenham, by all accounts, were good. So that's not a sentence we've been able to say out loud a lot recently. So good for them.
Yeah, moved to a 3-4-3. Odegaard and Simmons played pretty well. 2 centre forwards scored goals.
Obviously, the 2-2 against Burnley was not good at the weekend, but I saw the first half of that, and I don't hate the back 3 for Tottenham. I do think that possibly solves some of their issues and open up some opportunities. So interesting one to maybe this is the way for Frank, especially given how incredibly difficult their fixture list is going forward. That is the thing I was thinking when I saw how they lined up against Burnley. They've got City, Manchester United, Newcastle, and Arsenal in their next 4. So just sticking 3 centre-halves in there and trying to get through that run alive is probably not a bad strategy for Thomas Frank.
Yeah, Man City had to win, to be sure. And Nick, they made sort of pretty easy work of Galatasaray, didn't they?
Yeah, that was pretty quick out of the blocks, dealing with what looked on paper a very sticky assignment, I've got to say. Quickly, lots of hand-wringing before, especially I'm sure in Norway, about Erling Haaland's relative lack of goals, but the way he took that one was absolutely sensational. Just the way he took that through ball in his stride and just sort of scooped it as it bubbled up a bit. That was not the sign of a man who is lacking confidence. Nice second goal. I think it was Cherky, wasn't it, with a sort of cut low drive that was really, really nice. And I didn't get the impression they were threatened too much after that. So, they've only squeaked through in 8th largely because of that defeat in Bodo. But I think they'll be perfectly happy with what's gone on in this group stage. And you feel always that there's a bit more to come from them.
Liverpool beat Qarabag 6-0. Florian Wirtz got his first Champions League goal for Liverpool. Nice finish. Mo Salah scored a lovely Mo Salah goal. So that should give him some confidence. Ekitike got a good centre-forwards goal. McAllister got 2. And Chiesa scored in the last minute, Nicky. I mean, as someone who's always loved Chiesa, how do you feel about him being a sort of scores occasionally late on for Liverpool player?
Is that I'm someone who's always loved him? Because I think you've always loved Chiesa.
Well, I've always loved him, but I sort of got that from you. I think I got it from you.
Yeah, I do have a soft spot for him. I mean, I'd love to see him doing this more regularly and then maybe could contribute to Italy and then desperate hopes of actually qualifying for a World Cup for once. But it was nice to see him get it. What's nice, I think, about it is even just the way he celebrated, you don't feel like even though he hasn't been a regular, you don't feel like he's not part of the group. You don't feel like he's not part of the equation there. Obviously, this is not a particularly important goal in the grand scheme of things, but you just see the way that people interact with each other and you think, well, he's still part of this and he's still involved. But I wanted to say, I thought Ekitike was the standout here. He looked really, really sharp. Some of his movements, he looked really, really on it.
Arsenal beat Qarabag 3-2. I mean, Nick, not a huge amount to say about this game. Arsenal have won all 8 in the group stage, conceding only 3. They made 11 changes and their team still looked quite good.
Yeah, this was a one to tick off, but one where you don't want an embarrassment after the weekend's result against United, was it? And in the end, it was probably a lot closer on paper than I think it should have been, and looked on grass. But there was a few players getting their eye in quite a useful way. Gyökeres with a good early goal, who hasn't really looked worth the fee, let's be honest, and personally, I saw that coming, but good for him. Kai Havertz is probably the big one there, isn't he? Coming back and with that contribution, scoring a goal, looking sharp, and he is a player who Mikel Arteta, as we've covered on here before, I think absolutely loves, both for what he provides in football terms, but also in character and willingness to do the job asked of him. I think he'll raise them up a level in that department, frankly, and I think the big headline for Arsenal last night was him looking so sharp.
Athletic 2, Sporting 3. So this late winner, Lars, for Sporting. Did change the complexion, right? They needed Benfica to help them. They don't love each other, Sporting and Benfica, but not Real Madrid down. But this actually was a really good game from the highlights that I saw.
A little bit of a shame for Athletic, for me, the way their season is going, that they're struggling domestically and that they weren't really able to make a significant impact. I say they weren't really able to make a significant impact. They took 1 point less than Bodo Glimt to have saved European football. So these are the margins, We talk about how there's no... It did strike me this, watching and paying more attention to this end of the table for obvious reasons. It's come down to 1 point and like goal difference and stuff. So I think if you take anything away from this for next season and for future iterations, the teams who are just kind of hoping to get through, really, absolutely everything matters. All these games, like the fact that getting blown out by a team is worth avoiding, because that goal difference and that 1 point, and it was very, very tight down there.
I loved the winning goal of Sporting, and similarly to what we saw in the Benfica game, it was an old-fashioned, old-school bench clearer. People running everywhere, random men in bomber jackets and suits who you'll never see again in your life. Injured players recovering like Lazarus and throwing their crutches behind them. Just like absolutely everything going on. Just pure visual perfection. If we're talking about clippable football, it was an old school bench clearer.
Yeah, wasn't it? Athletic had a corner, and then like the Sporting keeper gets it, and it's just this, is that the goal? Because there are so many, but it's this sort of blistering counter-attacking. Like, how are they so free? How is that possible? But anyway, yeah, it was a great moment. Bayern 1-2 at PSV. Nice to see Musiala back fit. I thought he was out forever, so that surprised me. And Harry Kane with a sort of Blackburn Shearer type finish. It was just like, there's no way he's not going to score here, and he did. So they've had a good time. Leverkusen beat Villarreal 3-0. Inter won 2-0 at Dortmund. Not quite enough to make the top 8. As we say, it's either them or Real Madrid to play Bodo. Barcelona were 1 down to Copenhagen, but they won 4-1. And USG beat Atalanta 1-0. Olympiacos won 2-1 at Ajax. Monaco, Juve drew 0. Pafos beat Slavia Prague 4-1, and Dragomir scored an absolute belter in the 17th minute. I don't know, Nicky, if you had anything to pick out from those games, Inter or otherwise.
Yeah, the Italian games were besides Napoli, were mostly a bit flat, to be absolutely honest with you. It was a nice free kick from Di Marco that finally put Inter ahead in that game, but it didn't feel like it was such high tension. I just kind of wanted to come actually off the back of what Nick was saying about that bench clearing goal for Sporting. I think sometimes, and that's what I like about these big days as well, I think sometimes from the English media perspective, from the English fan perspective, we lose sight of how different the Champions League feels to clubs from other countries. I think there is a certain amount of Premier League presumptuousness at this point, rightly, because the money's there and they should be going through. And I think what was actually really fun to me last night was seeing how much of a difference it made to Sporting, like as a club, their fans and their players, to be in the top 8. I mean, yeah, on the one hand, it's you miss a round of football, miss playing some football, which is kind of easy to be snarky at and roll our eyes at because it is kind of funny. But I mean, wow, they're through to the latter stages of the Champions League because of that goal. Like it was a huge moment for a club like that, and I think that's what. In football, it's always the moments that drag me back in anyway.
Before we do the Premier League preview, Nick, you've been writing about a potential boycott of the World Cup, something that UEFA officials discussed, actually. We've got a special explainer video with you on how a boycott would work on the Football Weekly YouTube channel tomorrow. Go and subscribe and search Guardian Football Weekly on YouTube, please. You can see what we all look like. Maybe one view is enough, but we are there. So tell us about that explainer then, Nick. How would it potentially work?
Well, I mean, all bets are off because it is not very precedented in the modern era, but I guess it would broadly have to be led by a government deciding that is what should happen and feeding it down to their FA, who would feed it down for players and then make the decision. I think the chances of such action have receded, fortunately, since Donald Trump seemingly rode back. I mean, we don't know from one day to the next, do we, on the chances of invading Greenland by force. But I just think it was interesting that on the sidelines of a very different event, it was a birthday party for the Hungarian FA about 10 days ago. About 20, 22, 25 heads of different FAs were there, and it was just very interesting that on the sidelines of that event, the conversation did come up. Meetings were had among various FA heads saying, "What do we do? What do we do if this absolutely goes to hell? What would a coherent European response look like? How far would we have to go?" And it was, and I think continues to be, a very serious conversation. A boycott, I think, is the most extreme thing that could happen. I think it would be, in my opinion, entirely contingent on what happened with Greenland. I think probably, unfortunately, the appalling situation we see with the ice operatives and that kind of thing, and the tragic events that we're all horrified by, it probably won't be enough. But I think military aggression would be the red line there, and I think various European FA heads would share that view at the moment.
Right. Tell us about the futsal tournament you went to in Croatia as well.
So connected to this, Greenland obviously don't have many opportunities to show a representation of themselves through team sport. They aren't in UEFA or FIFA. They aren't really allowed to play official matches against established countries, shall we say. But in futsal, they do get that opportunity. So I went along to watch them. Their futsal team, which is, for the uninitiated, it's kind of very intense indoor five-a-side kind of football, really. And they were playing in an 8-team tournament in a little village in Istria called Labin, very nice place. And I went along to watch, and just to meet their players and team and get a feel for how they were taking everything. And I think, they didn't very sensibly come out with big statements about what they thought about Trump over politics and stuff like that. It's incredibly sensitive. But what I think they wanted to convey was that Greenland is not just the lump of ice, the chunk of ice that the current US president spoke about. It's a place with human stories and dreams and ambitions and people who are very, very talented at what they do. So I enjoyed them playing 2 games, including a very hard-fought defeat against Romania and then winning their next one. And it was, a fantastic group of people. They really hope for representation in UEFA, FIFA or CONCACAF at some point soon. I think things are working in the background about that. But obviously, very tough situation they've been in. I think it meant a lot to them to be able to travel to mainland Europe, to Croatia, and show this side of themselves, even in a fairly obscure futsal tournament that not many people have heard of until now.
And look, good that you went. Good that the Guardian can do those sort of things. Premier League weekend then. Nicky, Arsenal are bottling it, aren't they? They go to Elland Road on Saturday, and that is a tricky game to off the back
Leeds
of the
only lost like once
United.
since November. Leeds don't lose a lot of games. They obviously, the one game they did lose, I think, in all that time was against Newcastle, which was a pretty seesawing game. It was 4-3, and they drew with United recently. They are not pushovers by any stretch, and they're also not on this relentless 2-a-week schedule that Arsenal have been on. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier in the show, 11 changes in midweek. Be interesting to see if any of those players stick. It is really nice to see Kai Havertz back and looking like himself, but it is feeling a little bit wobbly at the moment. We've gone past the point where you can ignore it and brush it off, and I think that what's most troubling to me is actually just how which perhaps was a chance to get past this a bit midweek, didn't happen. How easily we're conceding goals at the moment, Arsenal. I think the defence suddenly doesn't look as safe. And I did see something about, I think it's like the last 5 shots on target have all gone in, which is one of those stats that feels awful, but also can't go on forever. The last 5 shots on target is against Arsenal. But yeah, it feels fraught for Arsenal, definitely.
Can I very quickly put a question to the floor, which is, why are Arsenal so panicky and stressed? Because still top of the league, incredible in Champions League.
It's been a really long time.
Is it
it's
just
been a long
that?
time, and
I was absolutely baffled that they booed the team off after losing like their first game at home in the league all year. Like, what is happening? Settle down. You're 4 points clear at the top of the league.
I actually know I know lots of Arsenal season ticket holders, but someone whose picture was used. You can barely see them in it, but it was used on an Athletic article about Arsenal fans booing, and he was so angry because he was like, "I wasn't booing, it wasn't me."
That's great. I can see it. I can totally see it. The last 2 seasons, until it's done and done. Of course they'll panic. It's just funny that even the team that are 4 points clear that won every game in the Champions League, they're panicking. Like, what's the rest of us doing? Spurs.
Imagine if you were Spurs fans. Good Lord.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to them. How you are. So am I, Lars. Look, they play Man City. We alluded to that 3-4-3, but it is the start of a really tough fixture. You know, for Thomas Frank to come out of these 4 games with much, and his job does seem unlikely.
We'll see how much grace this Champions League run of victories against under par Bundesliga sides has done for him. It's gonna be tough. I think they tend to give City historically, I think, a pretty good game at home, and I think that will weigh in. I think the crowd will be up. I think the atmosphere in there will be good. I think they'll be behind the team now. Maybe the 3 at the back will help against a City side that will dominate possession, of course, and Spurs will inevitably have to look for the counter and set pieces. But I think this will be quite a tight game. It's a big chance for City. It's one they need to win, really. But I think it'll be closer maybe than some people might predict.
Well, I've reached the point of the cycle where I don't think this is going to get better, and I start sort of disengaging emotionally a little bit. But if we're trying to look for potential, trying to talk ourselves into there being a chance of good things happening in general, I think the games where Spurs have looked competent under Thomas Frank have tended to be the ones where there's no expectation on them to play football. Like, they really struggle against teams where it's on them to have the ball and make the football happen. They're not good at that. But in games where you can kind of, do set pieces, long balls, counterattacks, there have been some semi-competent performances in those types of games. And they have a couple of games that on paper look horrendous, but at least no one's expecting them to play football. And maybe just, set pieces, counterattacks, and maybe that suits what they are able to do right now. And Thomas Frank was widely ridiculed for saying they weren't that bad against Burnley, but there were some positives in the first half against statistically the worst team in the league, and they were by all accounts good against Frankfurt. So I'm not really convincing anyone, least of all myself, of this. I just think it's all bad right now.
Yeah, but you're right. Man City absolutely do need to win to keep the pressure on Arsenal, depending, of course, on what Arsenal do at Elland Road. Liverpool, Newcastle at Anfield. And there is pressure, Nicky, on Slot. Like, there is a lot of pressure on him now. And Newcastle, we've mentioned they do have injury problems, but they are, it's not a simple game for Liverpool, is.
No, I feel like you could really see how much Slot was just relieved to be getting the midweek off from it and to be in that different environment, and obviously the team performing so well in a very winnable game against Qarabag. But I think it felt like there was a degree of relief in just everyone's demeanour in the way that went against Qarabag. But this is a very tough return to the Premier League. And again, we just saw Newcastle likewise have their own shift in energy in midweek, and the way they'll come out of that PSG game feeling like, well, now we've got Harvey Barnes and Anthony Gordon playing like that and back and available. We know we can hurt anybody. And this is definitely not a straightforward game for either team, but I suppose with the pressure being very much on Arne Slot's shoulders in particular.
Elsewhere, Wolves play Bournemouth, Brighton, Everton, Chelsea, West Ham. West Ham have got Adama Traore in feels very West Ham, doesn't it? Player Nuno knows very well. He played really well for him at Wolves. Lucas Paquetá looks like he's off to Flamengo for 35 million. On Chelsea, Raheem Sterling has left them by mutual consent. He had 18 months remaining on a £325,000 a week deal. He's 31. Will be fascinating to see where he ends up next. What a staggering amount of money for not doing anything. I know it's not his fault that he wasn't doing anything. But we'd all take it. Villa Brentford, Tammy Abraham signed for 18.2 million on a 4.5-year deal. And they've also agreed to re-sign Douglas Luiz on loan. So, you know, they're making moves in January like they did last year. Yes, Lars?
Really, really intrigued by United Fulham this weekend, I have to say. Because we've now had, I don't know if you were getting to it, but I sensed that we were winding down. Yeah. I just think it's worth saying because we've had this Man United are back moment with these two incredible results, masterminded by Michael Carrick, who is very much at the wheel and looking very likely to stay there, to be honest. I think this seems to be a thing that might be happening. Of course, this will be completely different. Like this is similarly to Tottenham. This is a game where they can't set up to counter and punish the opponent. They're at home against Fulham. They need to play their own game. Is that something they know how to do? I think that's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Forest Palace in the Europa Conference, Europa League angsty match. Sunderland Burnley. We'll cover them all on Monday. But that will do for today. We managed to get through all the games, so we should feel very proud of ourselves. Thanks, everybody.